Morning, Johnny. It's good to see you again. I know we're close by, me in Cambodia and you probably in Vietnam, but been wanting to catch up with you for a while about what you've been doing with Đại Việt Rugby. We were just saying before we started recording, we've known each other for a while through playing social rugby, similar programs that we've both had different involvements in, like ChildFund, Pass It Back.
Yep.
But maybe for anyone who doesn't know you, just tell me a bit about your background and how you came to be in Vietnam itself.
Yeah, sure. Steve, sorry, I should say your camera's still not on. Do you know that? Yeah.
I don't have the ability to switch it on. It's on your side.
Oh,
I tried to do it earlier.
there you are.
Now
There
I
you are.
can.
There you
Yep,
are.
there
There
we
you are.
go.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Do you want to do that question again, or are you happy to
Yeah,
just?
I'll do it again. Yep.
Sorry,
Yeah,
mate.
earlier it would before you press the record, it wouldn't let me put it on. So that's another weird thing.
That's so weird.
All good.
I three, two, one. Start again.
Morning, Johnny. So we've had some technical issues. We're sitting in this steaming hot weather of Southeast Asia. I'm in Cambodia, you're in Vietnam, but it's good to see you again. Like, so we've known each other for a few years. I don't know how many, playing mostly against each other, I think, in social rugby. And obviously have a shared love for the sport. And we've had both been involved in things like Child Fund, Pass It Back. But very much keen to talk to you today about Đại Việt Rugby, which you initiated last year. But before we get stuck into things, maybe just tell the people where you come from and how you got involved in rugby initially.
Yeah, perfect. I'm from Scotland. I'm sure people will be able to pick up my accent quite quickly and my red hair as well. So I'm from Scotland originally, from a place called Motherwell, which is kind of near Glasgow. And I played rugby since I was 5 or 6 years old. Whole family played. My dad played. My brother played. All my cousins all played as well. So big rugby family, big rugby kind of background. Um, and when I went to university, and my plan was always to become an English literature teacher. It was really the only thing I liked at school other than sport, right? I didn't really want to do sport my whole life, which is funny. I remember thinking that at the time. So I thought I'd be a teacher because I always knew that I liked coaching. I liked being in that education space. I liked kind of helping people and all that kind of stuff. And so I decided to go overseas to do a little bit of teaching abroad, so teaching English as a foreign language. And there was two reasons for that. One was to do a little bit of exploring and like be in different cultures and things like that. And two was to get as far away from Scotland as I could, just to get out of the hometown, just to see something different. But I was also quite young at the time, I felt, and so I wasn't ready to be in a career like being a teacher. So at the time, I had four options on this kind of internship thing that we did, and they were China, Thailand, Poland, and Vietnam. I wasn't too interested in Poland because it was still Europe, so it was still pretty close to Scotland. China, I wasn't so interested in. Thailand, I knew a few people who'd been, but it was just like at that time for me, it was just a party. That's all I knew about Thailand, and I wasn't interested in that. So I didn't know anything about Vietnam except for what I'd seen in the movies, and so I chose to come to Vietnam. And yes, I did teaching and teacher development kind of work for the first 3 years of my time here in Vietnam. Yeah.
And when was that? When did you first get to Vietnam?
2013, August
Okay, so
2013. Yeah.
similar time frame to myself. And you're obviously based in Hanoi. I'm not sure if that's where you've been the whole time. Before you arrived in Vietnam, with whatever prep you did in terms of research, were you expecting to find any rugby in Vietnam?
Um, so I had looked. So I guess the real answer is no. I looked and I found the Hanoi Dragons, but at the time I was looking for a break from rugby because I played my whole life and I just kind of wanted a break from. At the time, I felt like sometimes it could be quite a negative environment, and I just wanted a bit of a change from that. I wanted to make new friends, have new experiences and stuff like that. So I knew the Dragons were there, but it was about a year before I felt like actually I need that outlet, and I like having a different group of friends, and I like having the rugby club kind of community there. And so a year after being in Vietnam, I got into the club, and I've been part of the Dragons ever since, and I still am.
Yeah, it's we were saying before, it's I find it's a very unique setup, social rugby in Southeast Asia. Obviously, we'd all like to see more local player development and more local players involved. But for a lot of us who are expats, it is an immediate group of friends. It's a social outlet. You still get out there and run around and have fun. So it's very unique. And I think there's only been really I mean, maybe it's always been there, but the last few years, I think the secret's out. Now, when you see touring teams come over, you see former internationals come to these tournaments, they realize unique social scene it is, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's so true. Like for a lot of people who live overseas, the rugby club is their immediate kind of family or support system, right? So it holds a really close kind of space in people's hearts for sure. And yeah, I think the work that's been going on across Asia over the last couple of years has been great. Like, and social media is a big part of that, right? Where people are looking for, especially in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, they're looking for something a little bit different, and they're looking for a little end of season tour or something like that, and they just Google it and they see, oh, the Hanoi tens, oh, the Vientiane tens, oh, the Phnom Penh tens, right? So it's quite interesting, right? And I think it's becoming more and more of a quite a cool destination for people to come and play, but also kind of do a bit of touring and seeing a place that's very, very different from where they live, you know?
Yep, definitely. I think also, I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm not going to speak too much about Cambodian rugby and its lack of development, but Vietnam is in a unique position where there isn't currently a rugby federation. So it's probably one of the few countries I can think of in the region. And I've heard, we've both been here more than a decade. I've heard at several points that it's something that might happen in Vietnam. So maybe that's a good kind of leadway in terms of what you're doing with Daviet, because you started it maybe middle of 2024, so maybe just about a year ago. Just explain how that came about and maybe what your main goals are as an organization.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, there's no rugby federation in Vietnam. There's no structure in Vietnam. There's no playing opportunities really for us in Vietnam, and that's just always been the case, right? It's difficult to set up, especially where it's in the past. It's just been mostly a bunch of foreigners. It's very difficult for foreigners to sort of to advocate for that or to really push for that, right? So I used to work for ChildFund Rugby, what used to be called Pass It Back, and I was there for just under 8 years. And during my time there, I had a really played a role in supporting the team in Vietnam, so the program in Vietnam, and also other countries as well. The program no longer operates in Vietnam, and so at that point, that was around the same point that I had started doing my own thing, doing my own facilitation and training stuff in Vietnam. And at the time, I was still doing a lot of community rugby stuff, right? So Hanoi Tens, coaching for the Dragons, working with the team up in Hoa Binh, the rugby team in Hoa Binh, and trying to help them to get some resources, to get some sponsorship, to help them come and play, to come and referee some of the games, and just to continue some of the work that had been put in place by the Pass It Back program. My plan was, okay, cool, we're gonna make loads of money with the business, and we're gonna use that money to fund some social rugby, right, for the team in Hoa Binh. Maybe do that in year three, which will be next year. It just so happened that things started to gain a little bit of momentum, and I was spending a lot of time doing this stuff anyway. So I figured I might as well try and really focus on this to try and make it like sustainable, which was saying itself really. But also it was just really hard to actually get anything done with the team in Hoa Binh because of the difficulty that we have in getting funds into that, right? In Vietnam, there's no real knowledge of rugby, so it's really hard to get, say corporate sponsorships, right? Then overseas, if you want to get international funds into Vietnam, it's also quite difficult. And there are ways that you can do it, but it is quite difficult. So I decided to start Đại Việt Rugby as the leading entity, legal entity that can run rugby activities in Vietnam, because that way we have something that we can use as a focal point to drive the sport in Vietnam. And again, if I'm spending my time doing it anyway, I might as well try and do it properly, and rather than just doing the odd competition here or the odd game there, I thought we might as well try and make it into a model that we can use to sustain itself, right? So we have three kind of, so essentially think of Đại Việt as the rugby federation in Vietnam. That's essentially the model that we're trying to follow, because of the lack of a federation in Vietnam. So there are a couple of key portfolio pieces that we have. One is the Hanoi Tens, and so that's our biggest kind of piece, and it's annual. It's only one time a year, but it's the thing that gets the most eyes on rugby in Vietnam, both domestically and internationally. And we've grown that from 2019. We had about maybe four teams and about six, I don't know, less than 100 players or something like that. This year we had about 600 people come down through the course of the day. We sold tickets for it, which was crazy actually. We had bands, we had DJs, we had a bunch of corporates and embassies down, which has never happened before. So that was a really good sign that there's potential there, right? And more than just a social rugby competition. The second piece that we have is the Aolang, which is translates to kind of like the Village series. And so we piloted that back in November last year. Bootstrap, we had no money. We had a bunch of teams up in the north of Vietnam, in Hoa Binh and Hanoi, and it was just to try and pilot a domestic league, basically. So we've never ever had a domestic league structure or a regular game structure in Vietnam, and that serves as the kind of the I guess the platform for that. And we'll try that again towards the end of the year. At the moment we're testing things, seeing what happens, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, seeing how we can fix things. And obviously, we'd like to get the Da Nang and Saigon teams involved in that, but it's obviously difficult with the costs that you incur with traveling, right? We all know that. Then the third piece is the kids and community and clinic stuff that we'll be launching in the summer. And again, we're going to test how that works. So we'll do summer camps through the summer for kids that are not at school, obviously. But then also we want to use that and we want to use that and other things to be able to fund some work that we'll do in the provinces. So we'll go out to get into Vietnamese communities and grow the sport across the across provinces like Hoa Binh, Nam Định, Ninh Bình, and all these kind of places. And that's a real key, I think, to actually developing the sport and getting it into the kind of the getting eyes on the sport and having parents see the value of the sport as a team sport where the kids can learn things like social skills and regulate their emotions and all that kind of stuff. Not that we're doing life skills or anything, um, but also get kids into the sport as well to see where they can really enjoy running around, making friends, staying fit, having a lot of fun. And that, if we can get kids into the game at like 10, 12, 13, 14, and have the structure that allows them to continue playing, to continue competing, and maybe get into that coach development pathway or the referee development pathway, similar to what Pass It Back does, then that helps with the long-term goals of rugby in Vietnam, right? So yeah, those are the three kind of main portfolio pieces that we're working on to try and grow the sport here.
I mean, they all sound really encouraging because I think, like you said, not only in Vietnam, I could definitely say in Cambodia, it's that lack of strategy, which has really held the sports back. So, just a couple of things you picked up there. Again, for anyone who might be watching or reading about this later, I suppose the reason why you had to have a legal entity, like you said, is often difficult to get overseas funding because they want to support a registered entity. So, that's the one thing which I understand well in Southeast Asia. And also for those who don't know, I mean, those clubs you mentioned, so Hanoi Dragons, Saigon Geckos, the newest addition, I suppose, is the Da Nang Gorillas, are the three main existing rugby clubs. But then Hoa Binh, which you mentioned, I suppose, is a legacy of ChildFund Pass It Back, and they obviously did a lot of youth and women's rugby development. Just trying to tie everyone together so that everyone's kind of, I suppose, moving in the same direction, which again, I know is not easy. Never mind the costs and the travel involved, but to get everyone on the same page to kind of move in one direction is maybe it's going to be a challenge no matter where you try and do these things, right?
Yeah, and you're totally right. I've tried my best so far to try and kind of join those dots. There's a lot more work that I can do to continue that, right? But I definitely see that collaboration piece as so important because, as you know, right, in other countries around the region where there are uh, different sort of agendas or different kind of views on what is the right way to do it. Quite often it involves ego, right? So I'm very conscious of that. It can
Yeah.
it can lead to power vacuums and it can lead to real issues for developing the sport, right? And so that's why for us, I think it's really important that we always lead with the aspect of development because ultimately, we could just do Hanoi Tens once a year and it could be fine, a bit of fun, but actually it doesn't really help the growth of the sport. So that's why we have the kids piece. That's why we have the league piece where we're kind of catering to all the different stakeholders that are involved or want to be involved in rugby in Vietnam, right? And there are other teams as well, right? There's the BUV team, which is kind of it's been established, but it's in the beginning phases of being established. Then there's also the French international schools, which they've had rugby for a long time in both Hanoi and Saigon. But we've never really done anything to connect with each other. And the Japanese Vietnam team as well, right? So we've never really done anything to connect all the dots. And that I think to me is the place where we can have those regular playing opportunities. We can have the opportunities for referees to get exposure and get game time. It's the opportunity for coaches to learn where things are working or not working. It's maybe an opportunity for us to do clinics on things where we lack scrummaging experience, let's say. So I think we're, we've had, 30 odd years of rugby, foreigner, mainly foreigner focused rugby in Vietnam. And I think that um, we, I think we can and we should change a little bit to collaborate a little bit more so that we can do a little bit more all together. So that's kind of front and center of what we're trying to do with Dak Viet. It's not easy, right? It's not easy.
Yeah.
Everyone's doing it on a voluntary basis. Everyone's doing it community based sport is difficult, right? So it's a big task. It's quite ambitious, but I think it's important for the sport to actually grow, right?
Yeah, I mean, it also, I mean, I agree with everything you've said, and it does need a lot of passionate individuals to kind of pull things forward. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And like you said, unfortunately, egos are often the thing that destroys this game in the region. We've all seen examples of that, whether it's social level or higher. I think all those elements you mentioned, everyone's not necessarily working in isolation, but all those pockets of rugby, if they're all going to be united and they feel like they have a voice and they can agree with what the best way forward is. I mean, that's going to be, if you can solve that riddle, then I suppose it's a big leap in terms of taking Vietnamese rugby forward, right? And getting that exposure. And like you said, the Hanoi Tens, which was only a few months ago, is a big part of that element. And you had let's say regional international teams come in. You've obviously followed that festival kind of model, which is obviously more popular on the Seventh Circuit, which I do want to hear more about. So maybe we just talk about the Hanoi Tens that just was. You said like obviously the attendance was up. You sold tickets for the first time. You had the band and the kind of food elements to it. How, in hindsight, do you feel that went? And what would you like to see already for next year's edition?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, the Hanoi Tens was big stress, man. Big stress. It's always stressful, right? Running these things. Anyone who's ever run a competition, social rugby, will know that it's stressful. But this one we took a bit of risk with bringing in bands and DJs and trying to do things a little bit bigger. But it was thankfully it kind of paid off. We managed to break even on the competition, but we had other things that we did around the competition that have made us run at a loss around the match official courses and things that we do as part of our development strategy. Are you still there, Steve?
I'm still there. Your screen's frozen, but I can hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Um, so Yeah, a bit of a risk, but a risk worth taking because I think that we had to show a model that was interesting to all the different parties sort of involved, right? To help us grow the competition and to help us do more work, right? I think overall we did pretty well actually in terms of executing the competition. And bear in mind, we did that with a team of three people, myself and two team members, Ching and Hian, who were involved with the Pass It Back program in the past. One is the rugby development lead, and one is the administration lead with Đại Việt Rugby. Um, so to pull off that event with just three people was that's pretty crazy actually that we did it. But we had some good feedback, some really really positive feedback. We also were looking for quite constructive feedback because we know that there were a lot of things that didn't go to plan or that we tried to mitigate in advance, but it didn't work out. So there are lots of issues that we have around pitch availability. Cost for pitch is it's astronomically high, and we don't have any sponsors. We had a couple of like kind of silver level sponsors who were like cash sponsors, but it's not like a large amount to run a big competition like that, right? So we had to we had to try the ticket thing, and we had to make it into a festival experience to try and make it um to try and make it worthwhile, right? I think we we'll continue with that model, and I think there are other areas that we can try and grow and expand a little bit to make it a little bit more interesting again, to try and make it relevant to Vietnamese people, Vietnamese, parents and kids, but also corporates as well to try and get them involved. Um, and we're working this year. I have a lot of work to do to try and build on the relationships that we have with the Department of Sport here to try and help us get access to better facilities because that's the big kicker that we have is just the facilities it's very difficult to find a grass pitch in Hanoi like anyway. This one's a little bit further out, but all the other pitches that are available in Hanoi, they're just so expensive. And so without any like financial backing, it's not possible for us to do that, right? So um that's what the good thing is that a lot of the players and teams, like, they get it, they get the context, they understand, who we are and where we're working from, and why we're doing it. That's really good. And again, I think it is important to say that, it's quite easy. Someone was like, "Why don't you just, hire an events team to run it?" And I said, "That's a good idea, maybe something for the future." But actually, for me, it was really important that we did it as us, as Đại Việt, as a small team with Ching and Hien and with our team of the crew from Hòa Bình, because it's for those people. It's for the Hòa Bình crew. It's for the match officials, for, the Vietnamese match officials. It's done by them. So that was really important for us to, as part of our kind of our purpose and our vision, right? It was important for us to do that and not just be another, you know, big corporate machine kind of thing, So there's definitely elements where I maybe would change a little bit, but it's important for me to set the stall out around who we are and what we do and why we do it. So I think we got that out.
I think also, I mean, credit to you and the team. I think if you understand your foundations and again, where you're trying to take things, it makes this, I'm not going to say easier, but it makes that clarity, because that's, we've all been to a lot of social tournaments where you're kind of leaving going, I don't know what that was about. But
Yeah.
if you clearly understand what your foundations are and where you're trying to take things to, that definitely helps. For those who might be listening or reading about this, I don't know if you already have a date locked in for next year's edition, but what's the one message you might want to send to potential touring teams who might be coming from further afield or even potential sponsors who might be wanting to get involved? What's the kind of one message you'd like to send to them for next year's edition?
Good question. I'd say for teams, I'd say come and experience a very, very different rugby culture, and it'll be your cheapest tour that you ever go on. I guarantee. So you'll be able to play some good rugby, have a really good time, and also do some touristy stuff, like really, really cheap. Definitely compared to where you're coming from, for sure. If you're coming from overseas. And for sponsors, for people who want to get involved, if you if you care about community, if you care about young people, and if you care about development work, then Hanoi Thames is the one for you, because we have a big vision to really grow the sport across not just players and kids, but also match officials and coaches as well.
Yeah, I'm just sorry, just put my video off there because you're lagging a little bit and your picture's frozen, but I have heard everything you've said. Um, you mentioned earlier also about the referees, because I know this is taken from your socials. You've had a number of World Rugby Level 1, I think, courses to accredit local referees. So it's important that they are Vietnamese referees. And I think from what I read, more than half at least were female referees as well. Maybe just fill in what the latest is. I,
Disaster.
it's time running out. Yeah.
Um, no, that's not even the time. It's the
Uh,
internet connection. I don't know why that happened.
okay. You still recording or not?
Yeah, still recording.
Yeah.
Sorry
Yeah,
about
so I might just ask that question again. So just so you know, I'll be asking about the referees, and then maybe just the last part on just on future goals in terms of where you'd like to see Daviet head to, and whether you think it's realistic in the future to have a federation of sorts. Okay,
that.
so like just saying before there, like you've had a number of World Rugby Level 1 courses now, mostly focusing on developing and training local Vietnamese match officials. And more than half, and you can give me the exact numbers if you have them, were female, which is obviously also an important part of the development of the game. Just maybe fill in terms of what courses you have going on, what the kind of numbers have been like, and what else you would like to see over the next, say, 12 months.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that the refereeing's not very attractive for a lot of people. People don't really care about becoming a referee. But I think for us, if we're trying to really establish a foundation within the community, among Vietnamese parents and Vietnamese kids, we have to have young Vietnamese people, women as well, especially, that can referee, that know the game, and also can coach as well, right? So the the big thing for us, especially around Hanoi Tens, is wherever we have something happening, we want to make sure that we're doing some kind of training and education around it because that's an immediate space where they can apply their learning and get some feedback on that as well, right? So with the Hanoi Tens, we did it. I think it was the week before Hanoi Tens. We had an educator from Hong Kong come in, Aggie, and she was great. We had, I think it was 10 participants, including myself, and I think one, two, seven of them were female. Actually, maybe it was 11 in total, and I think eight of them were female. Seven of them were young Vietnamese women who'd most of them had come through the Pass It Back program as well. So that's a really big piece for us because when we go to do the summer camps, then we have already a little cadre of coaches who can, Vietnamese coaches who can run the summer camps, who can run the little mini festivals that we have, can referee them, can coach them and stuff like that, right? So at the moment we just did referees because the Hanoi Tens was there, and now we have another one lined up for Saigon around the women's competition there. We haven't had much interest, unfortunately, for this. I don't think it's going to be feasible for us to run that, but we'll still continue to try and do that around every kind of piece that we run. And then the next part of that is for those coaches who've been part of the match official course, is to then get them onto the coaching course as well. And over the next 5, 10 years, have a steady stream of people who are accredited as match officials and accredited as coaches. And hopefully in the next 5, maybe 6 years, let's see, we'll have a fully Vietnamese match official team at Hanoi Tens. And that means then for every other competition that we have in Vietnam or game, we can have a full group of Vietnamese match officials. Really important, I think, for us to have that foundation, because it's really difficult, right? To even if Hanoi and Geckos have played in the past, super difficult to find a referee that can do it, and it just becomes really difficult. So why not have more referees and build up that group and then be able to do more games in Vietnam? So that would be the first thing. Oh yeah.
I was just say there because you mentioned obviously involvement of having someone from Hong Kong China Rugby. I mean, in my experience, both Japan and Hong Kong China Rugby have been incredibly supportive of the development of the grassroots game in the region. I mean, we often have to lean on them, A, because they are so much more developed and they have slightly more funding available to them. But I'm always amazed at how willing they are to help the game kind of grow in the region. So, I mean, I just wanted to, yeah, have you had any other support from outside players or are you looking for any other partnerships that might be able to help you grow in Vietnam?
Yeah, for sure. So for us, again, a really big piece of the puzzle is to link in with the ASEAN unions. And I have really good connections through obviously through my time at Pass It Back with Philippines and Laos and Cambodia less so. Um, Singapore as well as another one. Thailand maybe less so. Because I know that obviously there's a big push around ASEAN Games to make sure that Vietnam is in the mix there, so that we can have rugby in Vietnam when Vietnam hosts ASEAN Games. So I'm still in close contact with especially Laos and the Philippines, trying to work out partnerships and collaboration where we can kind of rely on their expertise for referees or match for their expertise with educators and for referees and things like that. That's a really big piece of the puzzle for us. And also, we'd like to do more to in the future. We'd like to do more to have more game time, especially across Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. So
Yep.
if we can, I think if we can do things and build things properly, I think in Vietnam we can probably host. Let's see, don't quote me on that, but that's what I'm working towards anyway, so that we can host, especially Laos and Cambodia in Vietnam, so that we can get some game time for our young and kind of up and coming players, obviously referees as well. But also, I know that Laos and Cambodia struggle for game time as well. Outside of playing against Singapore and Thailand and all these other teams that are much better resourced, and we end up just getting whacked, right? So I'd like to have that opportunity for those three countries, and but let's see. Big ambitious plan, but let's see.
Oh, well, I mean, you have to have goals and you have to be ambitious. I mean, it's also none of these things happen unless there's people driving it, which is the reality, really. You mentioned the Asian Games there. I know it's Sea Games are coming up at the end of the year in Bangkok, and it's the first time since off the top of my head, 2019 that will have rugby sevens involved. I know previously Vietnam hosted, there was no rugby sevens. Cambodia hosted, there was no rugby sevens. We obviously had the pandemic before that. Um, from a national governing body level, we talked about the obstacles earlier, but how realistic or how ambitious are you in that regard that there could be a national Vietnamese rugby team playing for the country, what, over the next 5 years, 10 years? What's the timeline that you would like to kind of hit?
Yeah, so we talked with the Olympic Committee in Vietnam about sending a team this SEA Games. I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately. It really depends on how much we can grow the kind of player database, and how willing the the different kind of um, actors in Vietnam are willing to push and support that, right? I think the reality is that to have a national team, I think would be quite simple actually. It would be quite a simple thing to do on paper. But having a team that would be competitive and safe, I think is we're maybe 3, 4 years out of that. That's why I would like to do some game time with Laos and Vietnam, where it's maybe a little bit more competitive. It would be a little bit more competitive, let's say, than if we go straight into the SEA Games, or even if we tried to play Singapore. It just I don't think it would be safe. Um, the government in Vietnam are actually supportive of us driving this and developing rugby, and supportive of trying to figure out the best way to establish the federation. The part of the reason why I want to grow the sport across kind of Vietnamese parents and corporates is because I think organically we'll get to a space where, or we'll get to a time and place where there are Vietnamese people who are experienced with governance, experienced with business, and they like rugby, and they are passionate about that, or they become passionate about that, and they can then drive that process. It's not going to be me that will drive the process of the formation of the federation. So that's why I'm focusing on building the foundations to get to that level where there's a platform for it. Because I I think that based on experience and seeing things in other countries, if you establish a federation with nothing underneath it and no governing principles or anyone who really knows or understands what we need, I think that it will just become more of a problem than a benefit actually. So I know that there are a lot of people in, especially in ASEAN, who really want to drive this piece of establishing a federation. But actually, I think that there's more value in doing things from the ground up and getting to that space where it makes sense and organically happens. So that's where we're working towards. And I know that the Olympic Committee in Vietnam is they're keen, and he wants to be involved, and he wants to support that. It's just about getting to that space, and for us, of course, having resources to be able to actually fund, at the national team level, fund training camps, fund a coach, fund some, game time or whatever. We don't really have that right now, so we can bootstrap it, but it's really difficult to do that. So yeah, I think within 5 years, I think we'll have something there. But I think we have to start real small, and we have to kind of drive it and show that there is something there for us to organically get to that place where things kind of happen. So yeah.
I agree with the approach and the outlook. That kind of slow and steady approach, as much of a cliche as it is, I think is going to be much better in the long run. And I think that's also important that there is a long-term vision, sustainable aspect in terms of, if you were left tomorrow, that the whole thing doesn't collapse like a house of cards, because I think that's probably the biggest repeat mistake I've seen across the region, where things, although they need to be driven by passionate people, it also can't rely on one person. So I think if that structure and those foundations and those visions are in place, I agree with you 1,000,000% that that's the best way to go about it.
Yeah.
Just the last question, because I know I've kept a lot of your time. I just wanted to know, and you're not unique in this position when I've asked this, but because of the lack, I suppose, of visibility of rugby in parts of the region, you look at things like this year, we have, for those who are into rugby, the Lions Tour, the Women's Rugby World Cup, potentially the RPL Sevens in India, this new professional franchise, which is going to hopefully put a spotlight on rugby in the region. How much do these major global events help put rugby in the spotlight where you are specifically, or do they not really help because it's so obscure as a sport? Like, how do you tap into that maybe?
It's a very good question. That's a very, very good question. I think ultimately the short answer is in Vietnam, Vietnamese people, they don't know. They just don't know. They have no idea about the Lions. They don't know what it is. They don't really care, right? That's the short answer. I think where the challenge is and or where the opportunity is actually for us is how can we leverage those things to show what can be possible in Vietnam. So a really good example of that actually is like Hong Kong, right? We're never going to be the same as Hong Kong Sevens. We're never going to be the same. But there's no reason why we can't take parts of that and use it to contextualize into Vietnam and see what works for us, right? So I think where specifically, I think where I've spoken to a load of corporates in Vietnam, like, hey, do the rugby thing, and they're like, yeah, okay, cool. Like, I'm like, yeah, but your parent company, they sponsor all these. And they're like, whatever, we don't really care, right? But that's where I think this kind of festival kind of experience comes in, where it's more than just, okay, give us money to play rugby. It's not about that. It doesn't work anymore. I don't think, certainly not in Vietnam, because people are it's so far away from what people know or care about, right? So where the challenge is, or what the opportunity is for me, is to how can we leverage that and show where come and support us. This is what you'll be contributing towards. Here's how you can benefit from it as well. So we can set up these, events or experiences when you're networking informally, let's say, with other corporates, or maybe you're tapping into part of our demographic, let's say. Um, and so part of that is like showing them where that started and where it is now, so that they can go, oh, that's quite interesting, right? Whereas if you say Hong Kong Sevens, they don't even know Hong Kong Sevens, right? And it's one of the biggest rugby events in the whole world ever, right? So
Yeah. No, I mean it's funny because it's exactly what happened in the case of the RPL with India because I was there. The owners who have bought into these franchises were brought over to sit in their, I'm sure, VIP corporate suites at the stadium, but were just blown away by what they were seeing. And to be fair, we're talking about the pinnacle of
yeah,
sevens at its
yeah,
extreme height, but they could see, oh, this is where it could be,
yeah.
for people who maybe had no experience of rugby, and especially with sevens. And I think there's been videos around this already. It's a much simpler format of the sport to understand. I know in Asia there's 15 sevens and there's a heavy social element to tens. But I think just giving people optics in terms of seeing, oh, this is like the pinnacle of what it could be.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think it's funny because like a really funny example of this, and this is where it's quite interesting, being in Vietnam and working in the space where I've invited a lot of people to come down to the Hanoi tents, Vietnamese corporates, SMEs, and all this kind of stuff. And they're like, and what I would say is, come and in Vietnamese, I say, come and participate in the event, which is a really silly way of saying it because they come back to me like, do I have to come and play? I'm like, no, you don't have to play. I mean to come down and like be a part of the event, right? So it's a funny thing where
Yeah,
people just don't have that like reference point, right? They don't
yeah,
even this idea of like a social sport competition, it doesn't really exist really
yeah, yeah,
there are some some pickleball competitions or whatever, but that sense of like an informal kind of social thing where maybe you can do a little bit of informal networking, you can have a little bit of fun, you can maybe bring a kid down and there's like a little kids zone, you can watch a sport and just understand a little bit more about what that sport is, like it doesn't really exist, so we have to build that from the ground up. And I'm sure Hong Kong was similar to that back in the day, maybe more of a finance and foreigner element there than what we have in Hanoi especially. But yeah, it's a good question, and it is something that's like very very uh, very much a priority for me, is how can I show what it could be in 5 years, because when I talk to corporates now, it's like, you're too small, don't care, no one plays that sport. I'm like, yeah, okay, okay, okay,
yeah.
come back to you in a year.
It,
I'll come back to you in 2 years.
yeah. Yeah, it is funny hearing that kind of response because you'd rather, I suppose, have a corporate partner who would like to be with you along the whole journey. But we're
Exactly,
also dealing in the reality of the world, and their responses are genuine. So, yeah.
exactly right. Yeah.
Um, I appreciate it, Johnny. I know I'm taking a lot of your time. Like, good luck with everything you're doing. Because I'm just across the border, but I'm envious always when I look across at what Laos, Vietnam, Thailand, and others are doing because of, honestly, because the lack of what's happening at a Cambodian
Yeah,
federation level. But yeah, definitely keep in touch. I'm keen to see how things play out, and we'll obviously add all your contacts and socials to things when we publish. But I appreciate your time this morning and giving me a better insight as well in terms of what exactly Daviet is. So let's definitely keep in touch.
perfect, man. Thanks a lot, Steve. Thanks for the opportunity. Big part of the piece for us this year as well is doing a bit more media to get the story out there. So yeah, appreciate you reaching out and giving us the shot. Appreciate it, man.
No worries. Have a good one. Have a good weekend. Thanks very much.
See you, mate.
Cheers.